Welcome everybody to this little event. We have here a PCUSA candidate running for Congress named Christopher Helali, and he's gonna tell us a little bit about his party, his campaign, and answer your questions that you might have. So, Chris, you can begin whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon and good evening to everybody, or I guess good morning, depending on which part of the world you're in. Wonderful to see so many comrades here. You did pronounce it correct, comrade. My name is Christopher Helali, and I am running as a PCUSA candidate for the at-large congressional district for Vermont. So running for the U.S. House of Representatives against the incumbent Peter Welch, who is a Democrat. This is the first time communist will be listed on the ballot in Vermont since 1984 with Gus Hall and Angela Davis when they were on the ballot for the CPUSA. And of course, in the U.S., I think the last time communist has been on the ballot nationally was in the mid-1990s with a campaign in the Mid-Atlantic states. So, and that was also CPUSA. So this is a really exciting time and opportunity. We believe that now is a perfect moment to seize the situation and the crisis, both the crisis of the COVID-19 pandemic and the failure of the U.S. Government and the socioeconomic forces here to provide for the working class, and also the outpouring of anger at the deaths at the hands of the brutal racist police of many people of color, most notably the killing, the state-sanctioned killing of George Floyd. A little bit about my background so that comrades have an idea of who I am. Both my parents are immigrants to the United States. My mom was born in Montreal, Canada, but grew up in Greece. And her family, my grandparents left Greece. They were all members of the Communist Party of Greece. My grandfather was a member of the United Pan-Hellenic Organization of Youth, or EPON, which is basically the precursor to the CNE right now, the Communist Youth League of the Communist Party of Greece. And it was the wartime organization during the occupation by the Nazis, the Italians, and the Bulgarians, who were puppet regime of Nazi Germany, as well as my grandfather's two brothers, who were members of the Greek People's Liberation Army, or the National People's Liberation Army, depending on how you translate it. One of whom, George, or Yorgos in Greek, was executed in 1947 in a brutal execution of communist prisoners in a prison in Yithio, which is outside of Mani, where my family is from, all the way in the southern part of the Peloponnese, in Laconia province. So this is the area known as Sparta. And that was a horrific moment for the family. But he has been lionized by the Communist Party of Greece as a hero, and he's listed in many books for his heroism up until the day of his execution. So my grandparents left Greece. Some went into exile in other parts of Europe, and some were imprisoned. But my grandparents left and went to Canada, where my mom was born. My father is from Iran, of Lur and Kurdish ethnicity and heritage, and he left Iran. He participated in the Iranian Revolution, but left Iran in 1979 before the return of Ayatollah Khomeini. So that's a little bit of my family background. On my mom's side, 4 generations. I'm the 4th generation of communists. My great-grandparents joined the Communist Party of Greece in the 1920s. After the defeat of the Mikrasitiki Strato, the army that was in Asia Minor, that was defeated by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. My great-grandfather fought in that war, returned home, threw away his medals, and became a communist. So, very, very interesting history and background. I grew up immersed in that history. Of course, very difficult to be openly communist in the United States, especially for my grandparents and parents. And I grew up with a profound sense of love for the Soviet Union. We had videos. We would watch the parades, on the cassettes, on the VHS, and I had posters and banners and all sorts of memorabilia and relics, I would call them in a way, of the USSR. So I grew up, my high school days, my room was adorned with not pictures of pop stars and, fancy cars, like some of my friends in high school, but with a massive banner of the Soviet Union, and also pictures of Lenin and Stalin and Mao as well, because I was a president of the Chinese History Club as well as the Russian History Club in my high school. So it was an amazing opportunity early on to have a political development. I wasn't politically developed in Marxism-leninism after Occupy. I'm way before that. So, definitely red diaper baby here. My political journey from then on is somewhat convoluted. I think this is a problem when you read too much theory in the academy. I went to school at the University of San Diego, commissioned as an officer in the U.S. Army because I needed to pay for school. So I did that route, which is how they get you in the U.S. And I slowly moved from ML to MLM, to Maoism. And then eventually that transitioned while I was getting ready to study in China. I was a China government scholar for Sino-US Cultural Communication from 2013 to 2015 in the People's Republic of China, where I received a master's in Marxist philosophy from Huazhong Kujidashue in Wuhan. So I moved at that period of time from Maoism to sort of anarcho-communism, ultra left, so to speak. And I think that was a result of a lot of reading and not a lot of praxis outside of that. After I left China in 2015, I returned to the US, where I finished my schooling both at Harvard Divinity School and at the Greek Orthodox Seminary. I received a master's in theology, focusing on liberation theology and sort of the intersection of Marxism and religion. And then it was then when I moved to Greece, helped the refugees for about a year in 2016. And then I decided to go and join the fight against Daesh, against ISIS in Syria, where I was under the YPG, the YPG, and I served in the International Freedom Battalion, the IFB, for my entire time that I was there. And I was injured while I was there, and then I left with a lot of criticism towards the Hevals, the comrades over there, for their alliance with US NATO imperialism. And eventually I decided not to return and to support the struggle of the Syrian central government to take back sovereign Syrian territory and to kick out the imperialists who were there to basically balkanize Syria, in my opinion. Returned back here, and now currently I live on a farm with my partner and our kid and her family, 4 generations living on this farm. We have the sheep, goats, chickens, maple syrup, all sorts of veggies. And now I'm involved with the Vermont Progressive Party here. I've returned to ML. I was in the CPUSA for 1 year, and I was the representative of Vermont at the convention in 2019 as an observer member. And then I decided to leave and to join the PCUSA because I really wanted a strong independent ML party and not one that supports the Democrats or tails the Democrats, which is my opinion of what the CPUSA does. And so now we found it to be a perfect opportunity to, um, get on the ballot this year and to talk to farmers and workers in Vermont about the situation nationally and internationally, to fight against U.S. imperialism, and at the same time to advocate for a transition to socialism, which we believe would help small and mid-sized farmers and family farms here, as well as the working class, mostly in the service industry here in Vermont. So that's a little bit about my background. I'd like to leave a lot of time for questions and for people to speak and to ask anything that they wish. And yeah.
Okay, well, I'll take the opportunity to ask the first question. So, what do you hope to achieve with this campaign? How do you see Marxists in engaging in the electoral system in the U.S. and in capitalism in general?
Of course, we know that electoralism, the ballot box is not the way to necessarily to seize power, but we see it as a strategy to shift a lot of the narratives in the conversation, which are dominated by the two bourgeois parties, and we feel that it's an opportunity to push the candidates, whether we're able to debate them or to write articles and have media publish backs and forth between our campaign and their campaigns. We believe that it's important to change the narrative on what communism and socialism are, especially since the United States in particular is unique for the period of McCarthyism and the Red Scare. And so communism and socialism, while they are receiving sort of a resurgence amongst the youth in the United States in the past decade, we feel that it's important to challenge the conceptions that people have of communism or marxism-leninism of older generations. And this so far is proving to be correct and the right path for us to take, at least what I've experienced on the ground. But what we hope to achieve is not only to change the conversation, but to hopefully motivate more people to gain interest in our politics, to gain interest into learning more about the theories, and to hopefully joining our party. But of course, if they choose to join other parties, to get involved in a political project that aims to have the working class seize power. So that's sort of the general strategy now is really to change the narrative, to bring out communism to the wider public, so that it's not something mystified or reviled, and to really to engage on politics on the ground level outside of the academy or theoretical bubbles, but to really engage the working class and the farmers on these types of issues.
Iraqi Marxist, wanted to ask, what was your political stance before communism and how you became one? You sort of already talked about it, but if you want to say something more about it.
I mean, my earliest political formation was in ML. So in high school and in middle school, really, is when I was reading the classics and I identified as a communist. So really, I've just reverted back to where I was then. Yeah, I mean, my earliest political formation was always in progressive politics. We spoke about communism at home. One of the earliest memories I have, which I recounted in my thesis, was my grandmother speaking to me about, how Jesus was the first communist, and in the gospel, if you have two sort of tunics, you give one to the person who doesn't have it, and so on and so forth. So, always my political formation from my youngest years was one in which communist politics and sort of the ethics and morals of a future communist society were at the forefront. So that's always been who I am, and I've never been outside of the left. Yeah.
Mr. Seko asked if you consider the Soviet Union after the death of Stalin to be revisionist.
It's complicated. I mean, I certainly do consider there to be errors. I try to take a more nuanced stance because there were positive things in the Soviet Union after the death of Stalin. And of course, there were many negative things. And so, while Maoists will say that after Khrushchev's famous desalinization speech and the Sino-Soviet split, that the Soviets were revisionist and we should attack them the same as American imperialists. I think that there were of course historic errors afterwards, but that also there were tremendous successes as well. Both in the advancement of industry, scientific advancements and achievements, as well as international achievements and policies as well. So I think that it's complicated. I think that certainly for myself, there were revisionist tendencies and errors made by the leadership after Comrade Stalin's death. But I try to look at the Soviet Union in its totality as something that is meant to be defended, and its legacy to be defended. And so we can be critical of various aspects of Soviet leadership throughout its history. But I think that the Soviet project and the Soviet Union must be defended in its totality.
Atmanand, I don't know how to say your name, but I'll unmute you if you want to ask your question yourself.
I have actually two questions. One is, do you think that if Prussian model of education, highly disciplined, to educate people to be just workers and not more, is it suitable today, or we should go into some different kind of model, maybe something with more something more that is just memorizing things, like more examples and stuff? And the other question related to education, should most of people get higher education and most of them work in both physical and intellectual kind of work, to get rid of contradiction between physical and intellectual work? That's it.
I think that's an excellent question. And there are two things that I focus on because some of my family members are lifelong educators. I think to your first question about what should the model of education be, I think this is a complex issue. And I think, in my opinion, we should move to education models that unleash the potentials of every person. And I think that that's sort of what Marx was envisioning when, speaking about, farming, fishing, writing poetry, criticizing, all these things in a day. Sort of what can a person, what does a person's talents lead them towards, and how can an education model be able to harness that? And so I think that there are classic debates within different education models, sort of what we consider to be the more disciplined or militarized Central European model that extends the birth of nationalism and really picks up steam in the 19th century and is exported, is not necessarily the best model. Neither, I think, a model as extreme as the Waldorf school, sort of live and let free education model that doesn't have any rigor or discipline. Something akin to Montessori esque is sort of where I lie. I think it's important for education to be able to see where certain individuals are and where they want to be, and to sort of have a society that is able to nurture that in each person for the benefit of the society at large. So, for example, if a person is going through a standard sort of highly disciplined and regimented education model, but they want to be, working in opera or music, and they're not able to do that, an education model that I envision would be one in which you would be able to identify that very, very quickly and provide the necessary resources to cultivate that in the person. I think that that's part of creating a strong society, and one that is able to harness the full energies of the people. So I think that we should both have an education that is open and curious, and very much, through state support, able to harness the potential of all the students and to guide them in each path that they so choose. That really, maximizes themselves and how they feel and what they desire, with also the importance of the society at large. Because the society needs everything. They need artists, they need musicians, they need people who are interested in writing poetry, as well as sort of the standard industrial workers, laborers, technicians, intellectuals, and so forth. So, to the second question, I think that in order to, this kind of education model would hopefully be able to create a situation where everyone, it would be my hope that everyone would be able to achieve the level of education they desire. The society would be able to provide for everyone's educational, sort of needs, all the way up to doctoral level training. But to equalize, or sort of have parity and equity amongst sort of intellectual labor and physical labor, I think that the transformation in technology, and the transformation in production today, has created the situation where you have more skilled, advanced laborers, and then also on the service sector side, you don't even really need that much of an education to be able to provide basic services in service industry jobs. So I think that transformations in the economy should see that everyone is able to achieve, the education that is not only necessary, but even beyond that, that can fulfill them as a human, and as a human under a new socialist society, and at the same time that's able to sort of unleash the potentials. And in this case, I think that as we move towards full automation in a lot of industries, I think that it will open up avenues for people to have work that isn't necessarily considered by this current economic model to be work. And so for this, I think about sort of the research institutes in the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc, situations where you can create and spaces for people to not only try new things, but to think about new ideas, to envision possibilities and futures. And so I think that it's a way in which, number one, we have to say, what will the economic model look like, moving forward, not only for highly, developed countries, but also developing nations around the world, and how will this be able to, create a society where people who normally are locked into jobs and sort of conditions that don't allow them to also pursue intellectual pursuits and education, to allow them to also pursue those things. How can the jobs be able to create the equity between intellectual and hard laborers, physical laborers out there? And I think that it's an ongoing question. It's a question that the communist parties have to formulate, and of course it's something that communist parties empower, and also societies that we consider to be socialists wrestle with, and how to do that. And I don't think that there are any clear-cut answers, but I think that it's something that we continue to think about. We look at the past education structures of the different socialist states. We look at their positives and their negatives, and then we continue with that. And we can continue to envision how physical laborers can also have some level of not only intellectual pursuit, but also fulfillment from higher levels of access to education than sort of the intellectual strata that don't do physical labor as much, but are much more in the intellectual domain. So I hope that answers it in a way.
Give me that for free. You are next. If you want, I'll unmute you. Okay, he does not want to be unmuted. His question was, what is your specific ideology and how would you describe the relevance of that ideology on the specific conditions of your country / region / state / city?
I identify as a Marxist-Leninist. Right next to my desk is not the Bible like some other politicians, but the Fundamentals of Marxism-Leninism, which of course was written during the 60s in the Soviet Union, but it still has a lot of good things, and it's something I've always looked at and studied. I think that being a Marxist-Leninist in the United States today has certain things that we have before us. So we are looking at an empire in collapse, really, a capitalist system that is rampant and all-consuming. And so, what can Marxism-Leninism say for the United States, both at large and then also for Vermont and for my own county here? And I think that specifically on the sort of a national level for the United States, we can look towards Lenin to understand imperialism and the U.S. empire, which is extremely relevant, of course, to our current conditions, and it's something that my campaign focuses on and that our party focuses on. And we can look towards how Marxist-Leninist theorists and countries have addressed the question of imperialism, as well as others within the wider communist and socialist movements, how they've addressed imperialism and how we can use those critiques to not only address imperialism here, but to create a strong anti-imperialist movement, anti-war movement here in the United States. And of course, we can look towards things like the U.S. Peace Council and the World Peace Council for some ideas into that and other formations that exist. On the local level, I think is the most interesting. Vermont is primarily, still very much an agricultural society. We ourselves have a farm here, and our town and our county has a surplus of farms. We really have no industry. So I think that Marxism-Leninism can provide us with, different tools to address many of the needs within agriculture. That is the creation of cooperatives. We are currently working on the creation of a cooperative among some of the farms in the area that so far has proven very successful, purchasing equipment together, tractors. And then, of course, the movement towards collectivization of agriculture and sort of the scientific rationale and central planning that can unleash the potentials of agriculture. And this, of course, means the breaking up of the big agribusinesses and the monopolies that exist. So, Marxism-Leninism, as a theory can, really describe and diagnose the question of monopolies, and people can understand what that means, how that impacts them, and how we can move beyond that. And then, of course, we can look not only through theory but the practice of the different socialist states in their agriculture and in how they were able to transform agriculture from really feudal and peasant relations and the lack of technological advancement and equipment, and really the goods necessary to farm more effectively in larger scales with better results and production. And we can look at that here and say, how can we, maximize that for our situation here? And of course, I recently did an interview where I said that, small farms here don't make really a profit. They mostly stay just at, net zero profit, or they make a little bit of profit. And we're talking only $10,000 or $20,000, which is really poverty wages, if you think about it, for a family. So we talk about, a socialist society being able to provide tractors, being able to provide technical assistance and equipment necessary, being able to provide full support for the farms, being able to, sort of create cooperatives and collectives that can lead towards higher productivity and more labor power to come out and to be able to do a lot of this work. So I think that Marxism-Leninism can teach us a great deal, both not only theoretically but also practically in the lived experiences of the Soviet Union, of China, of many other societies, but Cuba especially, where I've been, and I've been to many of the state farms and small farming operations there, and have seen the successes of organic farming practices, of farming practices that don't use genetically modified organisms. The use of sustainable practices versus unsustainable practices for soil health and for the health of the environment. And this, of course, goes to bigger questions about the use of fertilizers or pesticides. So I think that overall, there's a lot of things that we can take from Marxism-Leninism, both as a theory and as a lived practice, to be able to understand not only the national situation, but our local situation, and how farmers would benefit from the transition to socialism, using these scientific tools available to us to unleash their potential, and also to make sure that the farms succeed here, and that they succeed in their farming endeavors and in service to the society.
McBoat, you are next. If you want, I'll unmute you. I see you have several questions, but you can ask one of them for now.
My question is, what do you think about the anti-communist propaganda in U.S. media and the brainwashing of American people by the bourgeois media and the academics? And this is if this is a very big problem, how would you combat this?
It's an excellent question, comrade. And of course, for those who know the United States and who understand the current situation, of course, anti-communist propaganda is everywhere. It is very much a part of the Russiagate hysteria that has taken over, as well as the anti-China hysteria that now exists, promoted by the neocons. But more so and deeper, the anti-communist propaganda really exists as a historical legacy, both from the isolationist sort of ideas about the United States, as well as from the incessant fear that the United States is basically under attack everywhere, and sort of the siege mentality which exists. And of course, it's now gone to extremes that are laughable for us. But, the portrayal for the 8 years of Obama's presidency, that he was somehow a Marxist, a communist, some socialist, that the Democrats are now hijacked by the far left. And, people look to, for example, the CPUSA endorsement of a, sort of united front, and supporting Hillary Clinton and now Joe Biden as sort of, oh my God, they've been infiltrated by the communists. It's all communists. We know from history that these are all, fears that have been, sort of created and then seized upon by those in power, to sort of create a situation where the working class doesn't look for alternatives, but actually moves to more reactionary positions. And that's, I think, the Trump phenomena, and the phenomena that exists with the alt-right and the different bourgeois mass media that exists, like Fox News and the smaller ones like Breitbart, etc. The way to combat this, I think, is to get out there and to differentiate ourselves from the two main parties, the two bourgeois parties, and to speak about the history of communism and of the communist movement as something that didn't start just in 1917, but of looking at, for example, the correspondence of Lincoln with the International Working Men's Association. To speak about the contacts that existed between the U.S. and with other countries in terms of their movements. In the late 1800s, speaking about the birth of populism, of farmers and workers' parties that existed in the United States, looking at the history of the Communist Party as one of the foremost movements for racial equality. Now everybody is hailing Kamala Harris as the first black woman ever on a presidential ticket. Of course, they say major party ticket because everyone knows that it was the Communist Party in the United States that was the first to put a black man and a black woman on the ticket. Of course, we have Comrade Ford with William Z. Foster in the 1930s and early 40s. And then we have, of course, afterwards, multiple comrades, including Angela Davis, that were women, both on the Progressive Party ticket as well as on the Communist Party ticket. So I think that what's necessary, number one, is to say, hi, I'm an American citizen and a communist. I'm not associated with any of these people, the Democrats or the Republicans, and this is why they're both screwing you over. And I think that sort of, jolts people, and they say, wow, really? You're not some crazy Chinese agent or, Russian agent? I think that helps to change the narrative, especially when they see. I think it's very important today, along that line of thought, that a lot of people, and especially in the rural areas where I live, think that Marxists and anarchists and all these people are in the cities. They're in the intellectual strata. And while, my family here and myself are intellectuals, I mean, I went to, very good schools in the United States. I work on a farm and I get my hands dirty. So they really like that. That's something that locals have said, well, I don't necessarily like communism and socialism as ideas, but I'm open to talking with you, but I really like how you work. And I really like how much, effort you put into your farm and in helping other farms. And I think that those are the ways in which we can slowly change the narrative. Comrades who are working in union organizing and in the workplaces to change how workers see communism or socialism. And I think that that's a really important thing. Communism and communist theory cannot exist without practice. So you need to be out there. You need to be out with the workers and the farmers. Lenin says this. Lenin talks about that in relation to both the revolution and the uprisings in 1905 on. And he talks about the importance of the students going to the workers, the importance of students having connections with the workers, and how it can only be when the students have connections with the workers and are able to work with them together that successful revolutions can happen. And I think that that's a very important piece of it. We face a very uphill battle, and there's no question about that. But I think that in changing the conversation here, it's very important to get out there and basically, to say that we are Marxist-Leninists. We are proud of who we are. We are members of, a communist party. And we are very much workers and farmers like you all are. And these are the reasons why the two main parties are destroying not only this country, but the planet, and are, the parties of war and capital. And that's how you're able to slowly change them. But you have to be uncomfortable and you have to speak with people who disagree with you. That's how you create popular mass movements. It cannot be from, simply an intellectual elite or a strata that exists that doesn't include workers and farmers that might be reactionary, that might have different things that, you disagree with. And I think that that's very, very important, and it's necessary to do.
DMT asks, do you believe that being voted into the system will let you change anything inside the system? If not, why then become a candidate? If yes, then do you believe in reformism?
No, I definitely don't believe that anything will change. But as Comrade Lenin said, we need to engage critically with the parliamentary system, knowing full well that the system won't change unless we have a revolution, but using it as an opportunity to expand our ideas and to build our power. So no, I don't think that anything will change. I don't think I'll get elected into power. What I do think will happen is that people will look at communists on the ballot and illusions will begin to crumble in their heads. And some will say, my God, communist is on the ballot. Maybe I should look into this. Maybe I should look into this candidate. What is their party? What is their platform? And then they say, wow, I agree with this platform. You know, there have been people in this town of mine where they are right-wing, full right-wing, alt-right, this, that. And I sent a big announcement, press release to the server in the town, to all the farmers, and one of them wrote back and said, I agree with everything you say. I just am uncomfortable with the label communist and socialist. This is what we are doing. We are trying to change the narrative on here and say, wow, really, they have these policies. I didn't know. I had no idea. And I think that is where we are going. I'm not interested in reformism or incrementalism. I'm against those. I say those on my website as well. I'm interested in seizing power, but that can only happen through multiple strategies. And I think a strategy of having communist on the ballot line is an important strategy for the sole purpose of debating the candidates where they're at and moving the conversations leftwards, building popular power outside of the ballot box by having people engage in these kinds of politics and hopefully joining the Communist Party and getting active in fighting against the capitalist system, imperialism, war, all of these things, racial injustice, all the things that exist here. And I think that's the strategy that I'm pursuing. And so far, so good. I mean, it's been 40 years since a major newspaper in Vermont had communist on the front page and actively spoke about what's going on in wars abroad, imperialism, U.S., NATO, all this kind of stuff. Where else are you going to be able to do that? So I think that it's so far serving this purpose of building at least a coalition outside the ballot box that are interested in getting active in progressive politics to push for a seizure of power at some point.
My turn to ask a question. How do you see the current situation of class struggle in the USA? You mentioned the coronavirus, the demonstrations against racism and police brutality and that stuff, general economic decline. How do you see the situation of class struggle in the US?
First and foremost, I see the contradictions of the capitalist system coming to a head, and I see the class struggle in the United States sharpening. We see an increase in the trade union movement and the strike waves that are currently occurring, not only for teachers, which of course is intimately connected with COVID-19 now, but even before the pandemic, teachers were out in the streets, massive strikes going on, strikes in other workplaces, especially in the service sector, whether it be coffee shops or restaurants or retail workers and department store workers. The gig economy, we can think about Uber, Lyft, so on and so forth, how capitalism is trying to make everybody independent contractors so as not to provide for the old labor aristocratic ways that solidified capitalism's power in the U.S. in its most revolutionary time, which is buying off the workers with pensions and a good health care and so on and so forth. So I think that right now we see the class struggle sharpening. We see the further immiseration of tens of millions of people in the United States the loss of access to healthcare, to good jobs. And so I think that now we have a situation where we can provide alternatives that that go beyond the social democratic or democratic socialists or whatever they want to call themselves platforms, which is stopgap measures to go back to some FDR-esque New Deal where workers can achieve some crumbs for their, still staying under the capitalist system. And we're saying that this is impossible, given the current conditions on the ground in the United States and the current economic order that exists very differently than at the time of the New Deal. I think that isn't possible anymore. And we as communists know that that's not possible. It's not the way out. And so we can at the same time be critical and sharpen our language and policies against the sort of rising DSA and suck them side of the house, as well as being ruthlessly critical and going after the two main bourgeois political parties. And I think that in this current situation, we see the class struggle sharpening, and I see a sort of convergence of multiple factors that give it a unique not only opportunity and situation, but sort of the moment in time where now we can build and we can build a strong communist movement in the US that goes beyond nostalgia, that goes beyond sort of the older people who were involved in politics to a younger generation that is active and mobilized and ready to get out to speak to workers and farmers. But the biggest danger for me lies in how to address the reactionary and the reactionary ideologies that the working class and farmers and people have given the situation. So, for example, homophobia, transphobia, racist ideas, all these things. A lot of comrades find it emotionally taxing to speak with people who have these kinds of positions, but we have no choice. As communists, we must engage the working class where they're at, and we must bring them to a different place, a place where we know we can seize power. And that means having difficult conversations with racists, with sexists, with misogynists, with all sorts of people. There's no choice, because this society, in particular the United States, is a society that has bred reactionary ideologies as a result of the bourgeois mass media, as a result of this nation being an empire and sort of proliferating both militarily but also culturally, winning the culture wars around the world with Hollywood and with how sort of American exceptionalism sees the world. So I think that it's very important that we gear up and put on and get in the trenches, and it's going to get dirty. As a Middle Eastern American, I can tell you that a lot of people, have called me towelhead, raghead, the Taliban, this, that. My father is, of course, Muslim. But it doesn't faze me one bit, because as they get to know you, as they begin to see how you do and how you react and how you work, those things slowly go to the side. So I think that the class struggle can only sharpen and be led by the communists if communists are ready to get in the trenches with the working class and to deal with all of the problems and issues that the working class United States has, while at the same time pushing them to new levels.
Next is Trashman. If you want, I'll unmute you. Also, people who are submitting questions, would be convenient if you type after your question if you want me to read it, or if you want to read it yourself.
Hey. So I'm going to ask what you think about existing socialist states such as Cuba and the DPRK, as well as revolutionary figures like Comrade Fidel, Comrade Kim Il-sung, and stuff like that.
It's a very good question. I have to say, sadly, I was an anarchist when I visited the DPRK, so I didn't fully appreciate my experience there in 2014 in October when I went. And now, of course, I look back on the trip and look at my pictures from the trip and really admire what the Workers' Party in Korea has done and what the Korean people have done to improve their situation and under immense difficulties and circumstances. So I have been to the DPRK. I have been to Cuba. I have traveled to Cuba multiple times, and I have spoken at the University of Havana and have very many good connections there with comrades. I think that it is absolutely necessary to defend all of the existing socialist countries. And that for me includes China, even though I can be critical, having lived in China, having studied Chinese, having, been, a foreign resident of the People's Republic of China for 2 years. I think that we must defend all of the socialist states, given that there are many powerful forces that seek to fragment our support and then hijack our support for a neoconservative agenda or for sort of imperialist agendas. The both being the same, really. So yes, I think that it's very important to read Comrade Fidel, Comrade Kim Il Sung, Comrade Kim Jong Il, even Comrade Hoja, Comrade Mao, Comrade Sankara, all these people. It's even Comrade Nkrumah and people that we don't necessarily identify with being, or adjacent to ML politics or sort of a strong line communist politics. We should read all of them. It's important. It's Comrade Ho Chi Minh. All these people are necessary to read, to study. We should look at the experiences of all of the world in its quest in all these different nations for socialism, the fight for a socialist society. We should remain strong internationalists. We can be critical while at the same time recognizing that we must offer our support against the imperialism and the imperialist actions. For example, we can be critical of Venezuela. The Communist Party of Venezuela is critical of the Socialist Party, the United Socialist Party in Venezuela. We can be critical, but at the same time, we can defend Venezuela against imperialist aggression. So yes, I think that the socialist states need to be defended, that there are tremendous achievements that the socialist states have achieved, and we must always be extremely careful of those who seek to divide the movement, given the history of Asian provocateurs, given the history of how the ultra-left has been used by the imperialists, how I myself look at my transformation and see how remaining purely theoretical has been used to really, in the past when I was an anarchist for a period of time, has been used to justify, regime change and many of the policies because, how great that other people on the left criticize these states as well. So I think that that's important, and I think it's important to always be vigilant along the lines of critically defending, and at the same time not allowing those conversations to veer into outright hatred for the system that exists. Each nation is unique. Each situation is complex. And I think as internationalists, we must first and foremost understand the situations on the ground, speak with comrades on the ground, and get more clear understandings of what's going on.
Sintoras had a really good question, so I want to ask that one. Let's see. Your opinion on the Black Panther Party and the CPUSA through history. What can be learned from them? What was positive? What was negative? And what do you think is the current most pressing task for the communist movement in the US?
Oh boy, big question. In 3 parts. The first thing is that the Black Panther Party, I think, had tremendous successes and also failures that we can look at in history. I think that So I will speak personally. I know that our party considers the Black Panther Party to have been a deviation from ML, to be very much inspired by the New Left and especially by Maoism, and so looks critically on the Black Panther Party. I think that there are enormous successes that the Black Panther Party did, both from its education, the community organizing, the school lunches, all of these sort of things that they were doing at the time. And I think the failures we can look at are questions about, and I think that these are perennial questions, questions about self-determination in the United States, which communities have self-determination, how can that be successful? What does that mean for the wider working class movement? I think it's very much complex. There's a lot there. We know, of course, that the Black Panther Party had very good and fraternal relations with both with the Communist China and with the Workers' Party of Korea. And there are, images from Black Panther periodicals and especially its magazine that have, Comrade Kim Il Sung's face there. They were interested in Juche ideology. And so I think that we can learn while at the same time being critical of some of the things that they did. And of course, you can always look at what happened afterwards to see, to get an idea of where the ideology was. So, for example, you can see where adjacent people like Angela Davis were then and are now. You can see where some of the leaders went to both reformist and then also reactionary ideologies. So we can look back on their ideological positions and understand what was correct and what was incorrect. And I don't think that's a job necessarily for me to do alone, but I think in different parties with the theoretical and ideological departments, we can look and analyze and understand both the successes and the failures. Regarding the CPUSA, I think that the CPUSA's history is both tremendously positive and very much tragic. I think that there were tremendous successes of the Communist Party USA regarding not only theoretical insights, but also their organizing in the union movement. They're organizing amongst blacks in America, amongst various communities, especially immigrant communities, Jewish communities that were able to come in to the party. Their ability to speak about, for example, Amerindian, Native American self-determination, and questions that nobody was dealing with in the major parties. Their internationalism, one can think back to the Spanish Civil War and the Abraham Lincoln, unit in the Spanish Civil War and what was going on there. And we can look at both their successes and failures. We can see the period following, both during the war, the failures there. For example, changing names, changing fronts, given the situation and the alliance with the Soviet Union by the United States and the UK, given the war against fascism. And then also afterwards, given McCarthyism and the Red Scare and the complete collapse. Most critically, we can look at the period following the collapse of the Soviet Union, the splits that existed with the Committee of Correspondence. And then afterwards, I think the most critical part of the CPUSA is the years of Sam Webb's leadership, of which I was involved. I became a member during those years. And I think that if anyone's interested, you can look at what Kukwe, the Communist Party of Greece, what they said about the CPUSA at the time, their ruthless criticism, as well as other communist parties and SolidNet, what they said. And I think that today the Communist Party USA is a shadow of its former self. And I'm very sad, having recently left it, that it was unable to get out of the Democratic Party's shadow. And I think that that's one of the most major criticisms that the CPUSA has. In terms of the communist movement overall in the United States, I think that we can look at some of the positives overall of the movement, and then of course the negatives that existed, especially after the 1960s and the New Left, both the positives that unleashed theoretically and the negatives that led to, and also the Trotskyites, sort of the various factions that existed from Socialist Workers' Party onwards, the various formations. I think it's a complex history, and as a good, I think what it means to be, sort of scientific in this regard is to look at the successes and the failures of all of these things and to learn from them within our parties, and to continue to advance and build upon the successes.
Maybe we have time for one more question that I thought was a really good one. So Default asks, can American socialists be patriotic?
That's a very, very good question. It's a question I wrestle with a lot. And I think that it is... it's a complex one because the question is ultimately a larger debate within Marxism and Marxism-Leninism about nationalism versus internationalism, patriotism, questions regarding how to transition beyond one's nation to a future international, and what that would look like, and sort of the dissolution of the various nation states at some point in a future. I do think it is possible to be patriotic and to be a socialist communist in the US. I think one has to be very careful about how they cultivate that patriotism and what that patriotism looks like. And I think that this is something that I've looked at other communist parties and how they've done it, and some have done it to better degrees, in my opinion, than others. I think that one can be patriotic when looking at some of the struggles that the United States has had over its history. And of course, the CPUSA and other formations have looked positively on the American Revolution and then saw that as a way to talk to Americans about a second revolution, a working class revolution. So using that as sort of, this was a bourgeois revolution, now we are moving towards the second American Revolution. That's language that has been used in the past. Of course, we remember classic photographs and images and pamphlets and speeches in the 1930s, especially 1920s and 1930s, especially of the Communist Party USA, with photographs and images and busts of Lincoln, and sort of harnessing those images. Of course, as somebody who's traveled to Cuba, Abraham Lincoln's statue and bust is in, for example, the Department of Philosophy and Marxist Philosophy at the University of Havana. You walk up there and boom, there's a big bust of Abraham Lincoln, because he's seen as a hero as well for what he did. So how do you capture these sort of historic moments and look at how we can reinterpret them and bring them in a longer arch of communist development and building towards communism? And so I think that can certainly that certainly has the ability to unleash patriotic forces. And of course, there are of course the correspondence with Lincoln and the International Working Men's Association, of which Marx was, of course, a member of, in which they say they laud Lincoln for basically not only the successes in the Civil War and the freeing of the slaves, but also that America had a historic revolution in 1776 and onwards. Now is the time for the Second American Revolution. And I think that this gets into some classic things within debates about the Enlightenment, debates about historiography and how we understand history. And so these are questions where we can sort of carefully assess how we would look at the American Revolution, how we would understand the American Revolution. If there are positives, how we can, sort of speak about the positives of the American Revolution, and then how we can speak about the advancements within the United States, the positives, while also speaking about the negatives as well. For example, a complete genocide of indigenous peoples, manifest destiny, sort of a lot of social Darwinism and things that were very much at the crux of the development of sort of an Americanism, an American ideology in the early to mid 1800s, and then solidifying in the late 1800s in the Gilded Age of capital in the U.S. I think that being patriotic in the U.S. is always much more challenging than anywhere else in the world, because it is the empire, because it is the hegemonic force, because it is the center of finance capital at this point. If you are looking at like world systems theory and you're sort of thinking about development of capitalism in different areas of the world, now you have a continent-sized country that has all these resources separated by two oceans that basically, it has the most military bases abroad, XYZ. So you're thinking about being patriotic in that situation. It is challenging. It is very challenging. I think it can be done. It has to be done in ways that would move beyond the narratives of both Republicans and Democrats towards this country. I think it would very much have to be, it couldn't involve God, because of course there's a lot of, the manifest destiny in the American exceptionalism always has a theology behind it as well. But I think it is possible. I just think it's much more challenging for us communists, and I think we always have to be very careful to guard ourselves from becoming reactionary while taking on these sort of patriotic slogans or values, or even creating a patriotic historiography on the left of the United States. So yeah, that would be my answer. I think it's complicated. I don't have any crystal ball or solutions to this. I just think that we would have to tread very carefully in this regard.
Thanks a lot for being here, answering our questions. And now, how can people support you, help you? How do they vote for you? Any closing statements?
Sure. First and foremost, I want to thank all the comrades, and especially you, comrade, for hosting me and for providing me this space to speak about these issues. I think one of the biggest things, as someone who's both studied philosophy at the undergraduate and graduate level, Marxism in depth, I think that this entire conversation could have been very theoretical. We could have spoken about the classic debates. We could have brought in a lot of theoretical tools and insights. But I think that for reaching the working class and farmers, especially where I'm at, I have to speak in language where people can understand it and slowly come into many of the classic texts and theories and debates that we wrestle with. So I think that if anybody felt that it wasn't theoretically deep, you're more than welcome to email me, and we can continue the conversation. I'm always very, very open to speaking with all the comrades. I have an open door. You're more than welcome to come visit our farm at any time. But one thing I stress to all the comrades is to meet the working class where they are, to meet farmers where they are, to meet the everybody where they're at, and to bring them to where we are. And that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. Not everybody has had the opportunity to read the text. Most people have been told that these are all horrible, evil, satanic, killing 100 million, billion, trillion people. So I think it's important to speak in a language that people can understand, and then to slowly bring them in and give them more theoretical tools and scientific instruments by which they can understand their predicament and the state of the world. If you want to follow me, I have a Facebook, Christopher Helali for Congress, as well as a Twitter, which is at Chris Helali. And I have a website, www.christopherhelali.com. If you're interested in reading more, I have been featured in Defense of Communism. For those of you who read Greek, there was an article in Atechnos. For those who read Chinese, on WeChat and Weibo, there was an article in Chinese about me that you can look up, or you can email me and I can share it with you. But overall, I want to thank all of you comrades for all that you do, for continuing the struggle towards socialism, communism, and for your continued interest in all the things going on all over the world. And I want to stress that we continue to remain, united in our struggle for a society in which the working class has seized the means of production, and let us continue to go forward, reinvigorated, strengthened, and at the same time willing to give everything we have for the working class and for the struggle for socialism, communism. So thank you very much to everyone.
Thanks a lot, comrade, and take care.